Welcome. Today we just want to do a short recap or just a few elements that we want to work with in our PHP. We would want to create a site that we'll be working with for the purposes of this lecture. So I'm just gonna go to my C. I want to access my XAMPP. Go to my C drive. I want to access my XAMPP. In my XAMPP, I want to go to my htdocs. So I just open directly the folder that I want. I want to go to my date 25 and I want to create a new folder which will be contact. So contacts would then be my page, and I want to open this folder and put some content. So I'll just put CSS. Maybe there's no need for the image. At the same time, let me open my Visual Code where I will put the content that I want for this particular page. So I'm just gonna go through what we have done so far, but create something slightly new that will also be able to use the concepts that we have learned so far. So we would want to create a simple PHP site where we'll implement some of the things that we have learned, and we'll also create new we'll also implement new values, or we can just add content as we proceed. So let's work together and see what this gives us. So we want to do the I also want this to be a PHP file. Right, we want to do the basic outline of this form. So this should be a contact form. Where we want to add some elements. We want to add some value. Okay. So what we would need to do is we'll need to sort of just have the context of how we would want this form to work. I've designed it into a system that you can follow along. We might need a part 2 for this video, but let's just have some of the things that we hope to see. So the first thing we want to do is we want to be able to use our contact form to be able to connect to a database, and then this database gives us some of the fields that we've got. So a contact form is a form whereby we get information and send it to a database. We also want to be able to have a database where we establish our values. Also, at the same time, we also want to be able to interact with our users. So those are some of the things that we want to do. So we want to actually include our database content here. We can create a form, and on this form, we then want to put the values that we want to work with. So we get our values, where the first element is an input. We have type, which is equal to text, and then this becomes our name. We also want another input, which would be our message. And would want the last element, which will be a text area. And then we want rows, which will be equal to 10, like that. So in other words, when we've done this, we've pretty much done what our form requires. So an input for the name, and the input for the message in a text area, for the message that we want to type, and then lastly, we would want a button to be able to send our information. So we put a button, so given this as what we've got, let's actually just go to our page. We put this as P25, we can put it as contact on that, right? So this is what we've got on our page. We'll need to maybe put more content here so that we can see what each of these elements are, and to also put a placeholder so that we can see what our contact form looks like. So as it stands, we're good to go, but we'll need to play around with our code a little bit. So for our columns, let's make our columns 10 actually. We can also leave our rows as 10. Click on save, come back to our contact form, and see what it looks like. Let's make this 40 then, so that it's nice and large. Yeah, 40 seems about okay. Right. So it still needs to play around with this and get our information as we hope for it to be. Let's go back to our code. We want a method. We want our method to be a post. And we want our action to be our index.php. Right. I think practically we are done. We need a placeholder. where our placeholder would be name, or rather, let's say, please enter name. Also want a placeholder and would want to say type subject here, and then for our text area we need a placeholder as well that will be able to say your message content. For the button we also need a type, and this type is also our subject. Given that, we then want to be able to push these elements. We want to push our elements so that we can be able to have this giving the result that we want. Let's go to our contact form, and here's what we've got in our contact form. So we are getting there. Before all of this, I think let's also put a title so that we know what this becomes. I'd also want to put it in the p tag, and I'd want to put headings. It's h1, like that, and then we put this as our contact form. So having put that, let's refresh, and there we can see that we've got our contact form. We are good to go. The next thing we want to do now is to just maybe design our page a little bit better. We need to create a CSS file where we'll put some of the designs that we want for this page. So I go to File, Save As, then call it Style. Then we take it as CSS, and we want to put a few elements, not too much, because we've got quite a lot to be working with. So we put a padding, we put it at 15 px. We want a color, we can use brown. We also want a margin left of 20 pixels. Right. We then want to implement this in our CSS, or we want to add our CSS. So we put link, we put our rel, which is equal to our style sheet. We also put our href, which is also equal to CSS style CSS, and we can leave it like that. I click on save, I come back to my contact form, and there we go. We've got our form styled. Not the best, but something that we can work with. I think it's better than what it looked like. Is there anything else that I can do? Maybe let's reduce the margin to about 5 pixels at the left. There we go, not so bad. So at least now we've got our form. We can work with whatever it is that we've got, and we do the best of what we can. So having done this now, we want to create our database, whereby our database, we just want to be able to have 3 elements, which is the name, the subject, and then the message itself. And then we want to be able to work with send, so that the moment we click send, we can be able to send whatever it is that is in these values. So given that, we then now need to do the following. We want to be able to say, at our database, we create 3 values. So database, we want to be able to create the message, the name, and the subject. So this then means we need a table that then gets this message. And to get that table, we also need a primary key, where our primary key is our identifier. So let's get creating our database. So our database, we come back to our browser, localhost, we select PHP my admin, and then we can start creating our database. And then we want to link to our database and get our information as it should be. So we go to new, and then we want to create a database called contact database. Click on create, and we're just going to have 4 elements, where our table name would be TBL contact. Okay, for our form. And each element now will then have an ID, a name, subject, and a message. So I had not typed that out properly. Message. We've done most of this before. It's more repetition, but let's just do it anyway. With this, we want this to be auto increment, and we want that to be a primary key. We want it to be 11. We want that to be 50. Want that to be 50. Want that to be 200. We click on save. Perfect. I think we've done everything in order. Now we would want to add or implement some of these things. So we would want to talk about how this can interact, or how we can interact with these 2 elements. We want our form, which is this one, to be able to send information to our database, which is that one. And basically what that then means is we would want to be able to do the following. I'll just explain how I got there. I just moved from my contacts database. I then went to table contact, and I select insert, and then I go to my preview SQL. So what this then means is that's something that we want to be able to work with, whereby we are saying we want to be able to create some SQL that then links us to our database and then to be able to actually insert this information. So let me just copy that and put it in my notes. So we want to be able to use the following within our PHP code. So this is our local host, whereby we can be able to add this information. So for example, if we put our ID as 1, we put our name as Hope, put our message as about the company. No, let's not put it that. Delivery. Good day. I wanted to ask about your delivery service, like that. So this then becomes our content, and our ID is the first element, our hope is the name, subject is deliveries, and let's see if we go to our insert. We're now saying at this particular instance, we need to be able to view our table contact, which is our table. We need to have the values, which is the value for ID, the value for the name, the value for the subject, and the message. So we are getting value number 1. We want to put 1, which will be the ID, hope, which will be the name, deliveries, which is the subject, message, which is the content that we want to insert. So let's just go to go, and then we have actually put our information within our database. So that's what we want to do. So this whole process is the process that we will now want to put into our contact. So we then need to create a separate PHP file that will help us to insert our values into our database. So we'll need to come here and then create a new file. And then this file will then save it as project. Click on save. So with this connect, we now need to put the following. We need to create a connection to our database. On top of that connection, we need to then put our insert. So we need to have following content. So we need to have a variable. We need to have a variable, and this variable can be con, and then we need to have our connection, whereby this becomes MySQL Connect. And MySQL Connect gets a local host, gets the username, it gets the password, and then it gets the database name, which is contacts db, and then we're good to go. From there, we'd want to just put a if statement like we've done before. If it's not the connection, we want this to die out. And we want to have a message. There exists no database connection, right? But if it's the connection, we want the following. Else, we now want to have this insert into our database. So this insert statement now needs to work, and we can be able to work with that from what we've got. So I can end the lesson here and then continue the next process in the next lesson.